Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to Books Corner on StatNews Global. I'm Surya Gangadharan. This evening we are looking at Blinkers Off. It's one of a deluge of books on China, and this time it's got a very explicit headline also. How will the world counter China? So let me introduce our guest author for this evening, Gaurie Dwivedi. She's an economist by training and a journalist by profession, and now she's also an academic. And this is her first book, Blinkers Off. Gaurie Dwivedi, welcome. So let's get into question mode. Gaurie Dwivedi, as I mentioned, there's a deluge of books on China. So what is it about this book that makes it different, that makes it separate from the others? What is the story you're telling?
It's actually good that finally there is enough and more literature around China that's coming in. We need to get over our earlier obsession as far as our neighbor Pakistan is concerned, and I'm happy that there is now enough and more literature now around China. As far as this book is concerned, you're right that there have been several very important titles that have come and some very important books that have come in the last 2 years or so. This book is different that in the sense it's not just an India perspective on what the China's rise or the threat that it poses. It's not just focused on India. There are several books that have come in from the Asian perspective. There are books that have come in from the American perspective. But this is slightly wider in its canvas. It talks about the rise that took place as far as China's growth story is concerned. How were its ramifications, not just for Asia, not just for India, but for the world at large. It also talks about that during this rise, the world almost became a fanboy, clapping on the sidelines of the rise. And now we see the results of that stupendous rise impacting us in several dimensions of New Age warfare. And that's what this book mentions, that the threat that rising China poses is not just in terms of our borders on Ladakh. It poses us in terms of economic warfare. When the second largest economy in the world decides to clamp down on exports, the pinch is real. It was felt not just for Australia, but for South Korea, for Mongolia, for so many other countries. Those kind of new dimensions of what the Chinese warfare can look like is what this book talks about, and also presents solutions, again, not just from an India perspective, because I think now it's China versus the world. There is no country that's now big enough to take on China on its own. And that's really what the premise of this book is all about, that if you want to counter the threat that China poses, you've got to do it collectively. And this is the broad roadmap for it.
Okay. So I noticed, apart from your headline, which is quite tough, I was going through your contents title, How Beijing Was Unmasked, Loot a Burning House, and something about Kill with a borrowed
knife.
Yeah, what is it about? What is all this?
Okay, these are actually not my phrases. These are borrowed terms. All these are part of the 36 stratagems that form the Chinese thought process. I mean, we can debate as to how far back they go in time, but they're almost semi-codified in how they view the world, how they view their foreign policy over so many centuries. And that's exactly what the 36 stratagem talk about. And these are phrases that have been taken from them. Specifically, they're quoted verbatim. So kill with a borrowed knife is something that I've spoken about when China decided to deepen its engagement with Pakistan, because that's what the thought process is, that if you want to counter an enemy, you try and reach out to the enemy's best friend and ensure that you bring some sort of an alliance in place. Likewise, loot a burning house, specifically, again, I'm quoting these 36 stratagem. It was used when, or I thought they deployed it perfectly well during coronavirus. When the world was facing lockdowns and everybody was trying to contain the pandemic, you had China, of course, making the ingress Indian territory. Likewise, also in going inside the airspace of both Japan and Taiwan and South Korea. So this is part of their strategy, as I said, semi-codified over centuries, and it's almost they're playing by the book. Nothing seems to be out of the script for them, and that's what this book highlights.
Interesting. You also have one here, remove the firewood from under the cauldron. Segment 4. What is that?
That again is all these. It's in quotes. That's why it's in quotes, because these are from these Chinese ancient philosophy, which says that if you want to create deterrence against an enemy, then how do you do that? By removing its biggest strength. And that's what the fourth segment of the book is, that if you want to create meaningful, powerful deterrence against China, then you've got to ensure that you remove their strength. Which are their areas of strength? In economy, if you want to come together, then you play by, you try and counter the economic warfare that Chinese have almost mastered. Likewise, you can do the same as far as technology is concerned, given how the digital Silk Road is becoming so important for China, how they are linking about almost 80 odd countries and the digital network they are creating. How do you counter that? Because the future of warfare is going to also be technological warfare, cyber warfare. So in all those domains, how do you counter the strength that China has, the Chinese economy has, the Chinese technological domain has, to be able to ensure that you can counter it effectively.
So, given that, would you say they have been able to successfully undermine India?
In any specific domain, you're saying?
Well, I mean, since you mentioned that they've worked systematically to undermine the strength of other nations, what of India? Have they been able to undermine us? In what way?
So, the fact is that communist regimes are able to think far ahead in time, whether it is China or whether you take Vietnam. Vietnam can prepare 20 years in ahead. They have planned out how they want to deal militarily and economically and strategically. Unfortunately, liberal democracies don't have that freedom. No liberal democracy can actually plan so far ahead in time, and most certainly not a cacophonous one like India. So that is some of the biggest challenge that we deal with, that how do we plan ahead for a country like China? So when you talk about undermining some of our interests, they get also undermined because when political regimes change, unfortunately, national security interests, the prism through which they are seen, also get changed. And that is, I think, one of the biggest tragedies as far as the political systems that liberal democracies offer around the world. So to that extent, Indian interests have been undermined in some specific domains for sure, because we are obviously not being able to think so far ahead in time as China can. I'm going to give just one statistic. I'm going to tell you this, that, the book also mentions this, that in 1991, both India and China, their economies were absolutely at par. It was $360 billion for China. It was $320 billion for India. Cut to 2001, China became a $1.2 trillion economy, and we continued to languish at sub $400 billion. Because this was a decade of tremendous political uncertainty, elections every 18 months, so many prime ministers, and nobody could think even 2 years ahead. Compare that to how China thought. Deng Xiaoping started SEZs in 79, and they started delivering by 2001. And that, I think, is the single biggest challenge that the world faces when dealing with a country like China.
So when you look at, given that context, do you see pushback by India and is it a convincing pushback? We've done some things on the economy, we've done some things on the trade front, do these convince you? You're an economics, professional. How does that convey to you?
No, the pushback is very clear. For the first time, I think there is clarity of thought that there has to be a concerted pushback against China. And when you deal with the second largest economy in the world, everything boils down to economy. Even your ability to pour money in your neighbors to counter the BRI comes down to your economic heft. You can't match a $14 trillion economy with just $2.7 trillion. You have to be able to expand the pie. Only then you can counter, the China champions that Rajapakshas have turned into. You can't otherwise counter even Nepal. Or for that matter, Myanmar, through which the economic corridor is passing. So that clarity of thought, I believe, has come for the first time now. But this is still work in progress. I think there is still realization is yet to come in that unless we think this through, we cannot complete what we set out to. And I think the objective here is to act as a geopolitical pivot to China in Asia. To do that, we need economic heft. And that will come in when we have clarity of thought in terms of manufacturing, when we have clarity of thought in terms of technology. 10 years down the line, the role of technology will be so all-encompassing, whether it is security, whether it is economic, whether it is in all aspects of even warfare. We need to have that clarity of action and planning right now. And if we are able to do that, then this India's potential can be achieved.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned Nepal, you mentioned Sri Lanka. In both countries, there is a lot of reservation about India. Perhaps it is more obvious in the case of Nepal. It is more subtle in the case of the Rajapaksas. How do we balance off that? The Chinese seem to have got well ahead. They've got deep pockets. We are not able to compete there. And at the same time, we are not keen on opening up our markets. At least this is a complaint I've heard from the Sri Lankans. So is there a problem here? How do we do it? We seem to lack confidence even there.
Yes, absolutely. There is those kind of bilateral trade relations are going to be very difficult immediately to sort of solve. But in the book, I give some out of the box suggestions as well, because, all these have to now be connected to BRI. We cannot, see them in isolation. They're all part of the larger BRI chain, so to say. And there, in the book, I do make a case that Japan continues to be Asia's largest infrastructure spender. It is not China, it is Japan by a huge margin. They haven't been able to convert that into political clout is a different story, but they continue to be the leader in infrastructure spending. Couple Japan's ability to spend in infrastructure along with the blue dot network that America has envisioned, along with India's ability to bring in more expertise in this region, together can create alternative infrastructure avenues for these countries. At the end of the day, all these countries need infrastructure funding. If they are able to get an alternative, that will act as their own leverage against China. There will be a day when some of these countries would want to have a leverage against China. And that will come in only if India offers that leverage to them. It could be India along with America and Japan, because it cannot be done only by one single country. It has to be done through an entire network.
So in that sense, when we tie up with the Quad for infrastructure spending in various parts of the world, and we also have a tie-up with Japan on Africa, I'm not sure it's getting very far, but perhaps these are early days, I would presume. So what is the sense?
Yes, absolutely. No, my sense is that this will take off because there is now a clear realization that BRI is the backbone of China's not just economic muscle, but geopolitical clout. When Hungary decides to not sign on a statement for condemnation of Uyghur Muslims, it is not because they have anything else in common except for the funds that are coming in. Yes. Likewise, the whole of Central Asia is now tied and joined at the hip almost because of the BRI funding that is coming in. That needs to be now countered, and it will only be through these collective networks. US, Japan, India together. I don't think Australia has that kind of an economic might to be able to counter and play a larger role in BRI or in terms of supply chains. They'll matter in other domains in Indo-Pacific. But to counter BRI, to be able to present an alternative to countries, it has to be through the Blue Dot network, tying in with Japan's ability to pump in money in infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. You don't think it's a good idea for us to join BRI?
No, absolutely not. And I think that's one thing I laud the two governments, successive governments, for that clarity of thought and to very firmly assert the undermining of our sovereign rights because of the BRI and how it passed through the CPEC. And I think signing on to the BRI bandwagon would be very bad news for India, and the potential it offers to counter China's skewed economic models, skewed geopolitical model right now, which is based solely on BRI. That, if we were to counter, it can only be done by our very, very vociferous and continued opposition to it.
So, last question, Gaurie. You cannot deny that while we don't like BRI for all the reasons you mentioned, at the same time, it's a great visionary document or plan or whatever it is. I think at some point you have to give credit to the Chinese for having come up with something like this and offered it to the world, although it benefits them largely. Would you agree?
I give them credit for understanding that what Japan couldn't do, they could do. By spending less, they've managed to get more clout. I give them credit there. But then I also understand that there will be a day that countries will start pushing back. The Belgrade-Budapest railway network will make money in 2000 years. No sooner than that. So that is how expensive that rail network is. So that realization will come in for countries. It's not just Maldives, which is saying that, I'll have to sell my grandmother's jewelry. But around the world, the debt spirals are going to start the pushback against China, and that will begin its undoing. And if India, along with Japan and US, present the alternative, I think that will really be the key game changer.
So let me throw in a final question. You mentioned that this Budapest railroad isn't going to make money. What about all the infra projects that Beijing is investing in Central Asia? There's a lot of ballyhoo about it, but frankly, what is there in Central Asia? Is there a market there? I mean, what do you have there?
Central Asia offers connectivity. Central Asia offers resources. Central Asia also offers ability to be able to have some sort of a leverage against Russia in its backyard. In 2016, you'll be amazed to know in Kazakhstan, massive protests had started because many believed that BRI investments had started in agriculture. And the Kazakhstan government had to come on record and make changes to tell the Kazakh farmers that agriculture will not mean Chinese investment. So there is a lot of apprehension around the world as far as Chinese money is coming in. Kazakhstan saw some very, very significant protests, and the whole of Central Asia is going to see that sooner or later. The reason why China is pumping in money is that it wants to also have a leverage against Russia in its backyard.
Okay, fascinating. Gaurie Dwivedi, we have come to the end of our time completely, I'm afraid. So very good. All the very best for your book. I hope it sells many more copies. And looking forward to more such conversations in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
And for all of you out there who joined us, I'm sorry there were not very many questions really, but lots of comments. So we found that interesting. Do keep following us as we bring you more editions of Books Corner in the weeks ahead, and continue following us on social media, and of course do subscribe to our website. And finally, I'd just like to add one small promo line, if you don't mind. This is about a special 3-part series on Pakistan we're launching in at about 8 o'clock this evening. It's basically a chat with eminent Pakistanis on the state of Pakistan today. So tune into that at 8 o'clock. Thank you all very much.
This is a government that was brought in by the Pakistan army and Imran Khan and his party. They share the same set of values, same set of goals.
So I think in the last 10 years, you have seen a move away from what might be called, politely as a kind of ambivalence towards the Taliban, to a more explicit aversion to their style of politics. I think that has happened.
The only constant that appears on the political scene is the fact that the military continues to have confidence in Imran Khan. And this is only because they don't yet have any alternative.
Ahead of Pakistan's 75th Independence Day, we bring you a 3-part series on the country's state of affairs through the eyes of eminent Pakistanis. Coming up next Monday, Wednesday and Friday, only on Strat News Global.